Jacques Ranciere is a French philosopher born in 1940 in French Algeria. Currently, Ranciere teaches at the University of Paris and St. Denis. He's best known for writing the Marxist philosophy-based book Reading Capital, which he co-wrote with his philosophical mentor, Louis Althusser. Ranciere's two most common topics he writes and speaks about are Karl Marx's ideas of communism and the exploration of the individual self and one's role in society. In this video, we'll focus on his book, The Ignorant Schoolmaster, 5 Lessons in Intellectual Emancipation. To fully understand Ranciere's beliefs and understandings, we must look at his mentor, Louis Althusser. Althusser was a crazed man with firm beliefs in Marxism. He was a longtime member of the French Communist Party, but as he got older, his mental illness declined rapidly to the point where he strangled his wife. Before all this, Althusser was the main author in the book Reading Capital, where he and his students wrote about starting a social revolution in France. Althusser was very outspoken against the student movement in the summer of 1968.
The Columbia strike may have reminded people of the Paris Commune, but May '68 in France was the real thing. What began as a student protest for reform of the archaic, authoritarian French university system sparked a general strike that electrified the country.
He thought the students in France were doing it for the wrong reasons. He thought they were revolting because it was the popular thing to do, not because they really believed in it. Young Ranciere stood against his mentor Althusser and advocated that the movement involving 11 million striking workers was beneficial to the workers of France regardless of the students' reasoning for demonstrating. Later in his career, Ranciere wrote The Ignorant Schoolmaster, 5 Lessons in Intellectual Emancipation. Written in 1987, the book focuses on human liberation and how teachers play a role in a student's freedom.
So the book follows Jacques. He was a schoolmaster at the beginning of the 19th century. He was involved in the French Revolution, as so many great Frenchmen and Frenchwomen were, as well as Haitians, we should keep in mind. But he, again, the sort of pedagogy at the time was, if you wanted to learn something, you had to find somebody who was obviously better than you to teach you.
The book is broken into 4 parts: Stultifying Master versus Emancipatory Master, Learned Master versus Ignorant Schoolmaster, The Circle of Power, and Universal Teaching. To start off, Ranciere compares a stultifying master versus an emancipatory master.
Listed here are the principles of the old master. They believe they are an explicator that stultifies the children that they distance themselves from because they have superior intelligence over the inferior intelligence of their students. They believe in the hierarchy of intellectual capacity and remain ignorant to the fact that children may have something to teach them. Therefore, the cycle of the explicatory system is perpetuated. We must abandon these principles if we are going to give everybody an equal opportunity at education. Everybody has a role to play if an equal opportunity for education is to be achieved. The individual must follow the equality of intelligence principle, that everybody can learn if they have the will to do so. They must emancipate themselves and truly believe that there is no hierarchy of intellectual capacity. They must perpetuate universal teaching and learning and understand that their reason is synonymous with will. It will be achieved through discourse.
When he uses the term master, he's referring to all sorts of authority, but most specifically he's referring to school teachers. A stultifying master is one who withholds something from their student. In this case, a teacher would be revealing information to their students only when necessary, such as an early grade school teacher. Even though this approach seems limiting, it's actually necessary to ensure all students are given equal opportunity and are staying together on pace in the class curriculum. Meanwhile, the idea of an emancipatory master is that a teacher is in place to help a student reach their truest freedom. The freedom is not what we think of as freedom, but as freedom in knowledge and being independent learners, not relying on anyone but ourselves to learn and understand. Next is learned master versus ignorant master. A learned master is well prepared in their subject and very knowledgeable on what it is they are teaching, whereas an ignorant master is not as knowledgeable. This comparison should be an easy one to conclude that one master is superior towards the other, But Ranciere poses the idea that it's not the teacher's role to know more about a subject than a student, but to encourage and push the student to greater academic heights and accomplishments. For example, a coach for a team is oftentimes not as gifted as the players playing the sport, but they must be the one to push their players to be their best. Their best far exceeds the coach's ability.
Plato tells us of the iconic teacher Socrates, who, in his famous dialogue with the slave Meno, asks a series of questions, allowing Meno to draw out from his own mind the fundamental truth of the Pythagorean proposition. For Plato, this dialogue is proof that if we zoom out, we can see that the mathematics underlying our universe exists independently of our experience, in heaven, unchanging. Enter our second iconic teacher, Jacques Ranciere, who tells us that instead of zooming out to see the forms, we should look closer to see what is happening in this conversation. Aha, says Ranciere, Socrates knew all along what he wanted Meno to conclude, and was steering him to agreement through his question. In order for real learning to take place, Socrates should adopt a position of ignorance as the two set out in a spirit of shared discovery. But does this make sense for math? What will Meno conclude without Socrates' expert guidance? Will he miss the truth that exists in heaven? And was it ever really there at all? How can Meno learn math if Socrates not only doesn't know the answers, but also doesn't even know what questions to ask? Perhaps, says Ranciere, students will know what is to be done, as long as the performance draws them out of their passive attitude.
The circle of power is not exactly another label to put on teachers, but is more of a social construct students and teachers unknowingly live by. Like a continuous circle, this concept of power gives the teachers power over the students and the students lack of control and power. It is very similar to the first concept of stultifying master versus an emancipatory master, but focuses in more general ideas. The student goes to school, the teacher teaches, and the student learns. Year in and year out, this cycle continues until the students have learned enough that they are deemed eligible to now have the ability or understanding to pass on and teach. Then the next generation falls into the same pattern over and over. Ranciere believes the best learning is self-taught. He argues that throughout all of humanity, the best minds have formed through self-discovery. And although useful, modern schools do not promote self-learning the way they should. Ranciere loves the idea of trial and error and believes a student's learning is the key to humanity's evolution. The final idea is really a continuation on the circle of power. Universal teaching is actually individual learning. In Ranciere's belief, all men have equal intelligence. It is only their will to learn that creates intellectual differences. This concept in his book is really a reiteration of one of Ranciere's favorite philosophers, Jacques. Jacques was a French educational philosopher from the early 1800s. He believed in four main ideas. 1. All men have equal intelligence. 2. Every man has received from God the faculty of being able to instruct himself. 3. We can teach what we don't know. And 4. Everything is in everything. All four of these concepts are used by Ranciere when he is creating his own philosophy about freedom and teaching. Universal teaching is under the assumption that all men have equal intelligence, the first point made by Jacques. And Ranciere's firm belief in self-teaching is due to his understanding that every man has received from God the faculty of being able to instruct himself. Jacques' third point, that we can teach what we don't know, ties directly to Ranciere's idea of a learned master versus an ignorant master. Just because a student is smarter than a teacher doesn't mean they can't learn anything from them. The final point in Jacques' philosophy is perhaps the most confusing one. Everything is in everything. This just means that there is no idea or concept out there that cannot be learned. Through education, man is limitless and able to see and understand everything. Ranciere is so inspired by Jacques that he continues to write books on him, including one titled Everything is in Everything, which he wrote in 2011. The philosophy of Jacques Ranciere is still important in today's world, and is something teachers unwillingly use in their curriculum. It's important for both teachers and students to understand Ranciere's philosophy. It helps the education field grow and evolve into a more free way of learning.
From the theory of intellectual equality to the analysis of the forms of consensus built by the dominant apparatuses today, etc., etc. One main concern, however, makes the link between my investigation in those apparently distant areas. It's a common attention to the way in which those various practices and knowledges imply certain cartography of a common world. They all map a common world by determining forms of visibility of phenomena, forms of intelligibility of situations, modes of identification of events and of connection between events. By doing so, they also determine the ways in which subjects occupy this common world in terms of coexistence or exclusion, and they determine their capacity to perceive it, understand it, and act.